Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Jam the Hype Live, where we help Christian urban artists effectively influence our modern culture to live lives transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. My name is George Moss. I'm your host here at Jam the Hype. I got my co-host with me from creative director of UIWI, Cherie. What's up?
Hey, what's up, guys?
I know it's been a busy day today. You got a lot of busyness going on, but I'm excited about this conversation that we're going to have today because, of course, 2 weeks ago, talking to Brie K as kind of like a brand new artist, and where she is and sort of like kind of mapping out where she needs to be. Then we talking to have that conversation with Trey last week about he's kind of found that niche, found his lane, and is kind of running in it. What I'm super excited about is for the past, I can't even remember now. It's got to be well over 10 years. I've gotten a chance to tour and hype man for one of the legends in CHH in the Christian music industry, and been one of the forefront leaders in this industry, and learned a lot of how to start my career when I very first really kind of started on a national level. He was one of the first guys that sort of mentored me at the very beginning. Also helped me to find a kind of lane to run in. And when you're finding your lane, you always have to pivot in different ways. And this dude is the king of pivoting one way back and forth. So all the way from Cape Coral, Florida, by way of Tampa Bay, give it up for KJ-52, everybody.
Oh, man. Wow.
OG, what's up, brother?
Oh, my gosh. I'm tearing up.
You know? Hey, that was a better intro than that one show where they completely read your Wikipedia bio to introduce you, right?
Wow.
Yeah, I do remember wasn't there like a piece of paper they had in their hand? Like
They literally
printed it off?
Printed it off and read it verbatim. Not well either. They hadn't read it ahead of time. They read it just got this printed off. Just breaking news.
Oh, man. Those are those moments when you're like, man, I probably should have actually ever edited my own Wikipedia page. But I don't know. There was so many things happening at that moment. Wow, George, the things you remember versus what I remember. Thank you for that. That's very kind of you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So I just wanted to hop right into the conversation because, whereas this afternoon we're on the time crunch a little bit today. So I wanted to just jump into the conversation. When you first started your career, what was it like to sort of prepare to just jump into where you've been? Was there any sort of preparation that you did? Did you feel like you were prepared? Or did you just like fall into it?
It's funny you said it because I don't know. There's multiple times where I felt like I jumped into my career, so to speak. So it really would depend on what part you're talking about. But I think no matter what part that was, absolutely. Yeah, I had to do research. I had to, quote unquote, count the cost. You know what I mean?
What does that mean to count the cost for an artist?
Literally and figuratively, I had to count the cost. I'll just take it way back to when I started. You had to rent studio time, but it wasn't like I had beats to go get off SoundCloud or something like that. Like I had to get the samples together that I wanted to do. I had to make sure my lyrics were, as memorized as possible. But then I had to call the studio and be like, hey, what is it per hour? Then I had to compute and go, okay, well, I have no idea what this is going to run. But do I have at least budget for 3 hours, right? And so then I kind of worked backwards. I said, well, I'm going to get as much done as I can in 3 hours. Then I realized like it's not as easy as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
So life has always been a series of that. You know what I mean? Like doing your due diligence. And even honestly, a lot of times it was just asking around, finding out from this person or that person. I didn't have the benefit of the internet then, but as soon as I did, that's where I was at. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think I'll be honest with you. When I started, probably it was more just for the sheer fun of it. I don't think I had lofty dreams or goals. It was more like, I'm going to do this so I don't ever have a regret of never doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That was my initial jump into recording.
So if that was your intention or your thought going into it, what did it feel like then all of a sudden to be this artist who was at Winter Jam, who was at every single Christian festival that any, urban artist would want to be at? And you're like headlining these things. Were you like, whoa, did you like pinch yourself? Is this my life? How did this happen?
Yeah, That's funny you
cried.
said. Yeah,
Cried on stage in Australia.
well, I think whatever you might have thought it was like, it certainly was not like. I mean, like, sure, I got onto Winter Jam really early, like 2002. I was not headlining. I was doing a pre-show before the show even started. So while I was glad to be there, I realized like I was up against a lot of challenges. Like I'm performing as people are coming in the building. I am performing with the lights up. You know, I am by myself on this gigantic stage. I am a new artist, so people barely know my music. You know, I'm like, how do I, it wasn't, you know, the idea is like, you're there. But the reality was I never thought like I was there. I've never lived my life or my career like I made it. I think it's just more going, how can I be the most effective, the most productive, the most efficient, and the most successful? You know, I don't make any apologies for wanting to be successful in what I do. I think that's biblical. But yeah, so I came out swinging. I came out, you know, constantly refining what I was doing in that little setting, and then wound up, you know, outselling people that were in the regular slots, like in merch, you know what I mean? But I was hustling. It's a hard hustle, you know?
What would you tell your your brand new just got a, you know, record deal or just recorded your first demo, KJ-52 self? What would you tell yourself now that, and with everything you know now, what would you tell yourself back then?
I don't have any regrets. And it sounds so silly to say this. The only real thing that I regret is get an email list going. Like I should have started so much earlier in building an email list, because the one thing that is the level playing field with an email list is that it's people opt into it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times artists rely on social media. You know, oh, I have this many followers. No, you don't. You have a tiny fraction of the amount of people that actually decide to follow you based on the algorithms. Mm-hmm. So the one thing that's beautiful about an email list is that someone said, I want to hear from you. Like you could have a tiny email list and a huge social media following. You'll actually have a better ratio of what you convert off your email list. Because if you start early doing that, you're gathering data from the minute you start. That's the only thing I think I regret to this day.
That's actually really powerful information, because I can't tell artists or any business enough that you have to be able to own your own audience, because Facebook owns your audience or Instagram owns your audience. And if you can't talk to them directly, if you have to go through that third party, somebody else does that for you and decides who sees it, or but no one decides who gets the email except for them when they open it or not.
Right.
I wish I would have done that as well. So like, that's the number one, you know, thing is to, at the very beginning, start collecting your email list. Anybody that's supporting you, anybody that says, yes, I want to hear from you, and then communicating and cultivating that with them. So what was it so where did you kind of find your niche in your lane, so to speak? What was the first sort of lane that you run in where it's like, all right, that's my sweet spot?
I don't know if it was, I'll be honest with you, it was failure that made me realize what my lane was. And the reason why I say that is, you know, I got a record deal, I got the dream, I was on national tours, you know, even though they were super small and I was struggling. I mean, I was quote unquote living the dream, and I got dropped like right away. Right.
Yeah.
It was that failure, so to speak, to make me realize that I had been skewing a certain direction that, well, maybe artistically, you know, it was what I wanted. Again, I was 20 something. We never know what we're doing in our 20s, but it was I mean, that's just the truth. I mean,
absolutely.
It was artistically where I wanted to go, but the results were not what I wanted. So that failure had to make me go, okay, what if I fine tune this to, I'm already seeing ripplings of people over here that are going like, we get you, like we want you, we need you literally, but I keep going over in this direction. That was the moment, like, as they say, that was the pivot moment, right? I had a clear idea.
You said you're going in a direction that was,
I mean, yeah, my first album, I just want to be about like a quote unquote MC's MC, you know, with punchlines and rapidy, you know, backpack rap. Like that's kind of where my head was at, even though I had inklings of commercial rap in there. But over here is this whole other market that essentially they're gravitating to these tiny little silly moments that I'm doing, right? That I'm not intending to be my artistic direction, but over here they're just gravitating to it. Like I'm getting way more traction over here, where over here I'm just running into brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. So, and this is like probably 20 episodes in itself, but it was all inclusive. It was a change in imaging. It was a change in the songs that were done. It was a change in content. It was a change in, I mean, I just had a clear understanding. Like, and I knew that I was going to lose people over here, but it was just the difference. Like the pond was bigger, you know?
Yeah. One of the things that really, by the way, if you're watching right now, go ahead and leave comments and stuff in the thing. Let us know where you're coming from. And if you have any questions for us to ask KJ, we might not be able to get to him, but definitely be able to get to him in the conversation later on. But one of the things that I remember going out on the road with you, and you are the master of saying like, all right, you want to be this sort of respected battle rapper, which kind of as an MC, as a true hip hop, you know, the essence of hip hop, you want to be respected by your peers. You want to be known as someone that's got bars. But what you saw is connecting with people. And I think you're saying the same thing that we were saying on the last one. You saw that you were connecting in these silly moments, and you've become this sort of, you know, for lack of a better term, which is, you know, the youth group rapper that nobody wants to be. But you found success in that lane, and you've been able to run in that lane hard for a long time and have, without ever having to headline something like Winter Jam, you've been able to have probably the longest career in Christian hip hop music ever, because you were able to super serve that audience. So what was it like for you? What are some of the things you have to come to grips with to say, I'm going to be in this audience? This might not be who I want to be, but it is who I'm been successful at being.
Yeah, and I think I should probably clarify. I think most people think they have to give up one thing to gain the other, but you can never have both. It was probably more of a pivotal conversation I had with Todd, who was my producer and sort of mentor at the time. He basically said, you have to earn the right to be heard. You know what I mean? He's like, if you're willing to give up something on the front end to play the long game, you'll always get what you want, and you can do what you want to do later on. And it's not that I had to give up those artistic things that I wanted so badly. It's just I had to earn the right to have those things heard. So I was going the opposite direction. You know what I'm saying? I was going the opposite direction versus it's kind of like if you're willing to give people what they want per se, then you can always do what you want. You know what I mean? Like, put it this way. Everybody loves the guy that brings the pizza.
Yeah.
If you're the guy that shows up with the pizza, everybody loves Dave, the pizza guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're willing to bring the pizza, so to speak,
but does it ever get to that point where it's like, man, I'm tired of being the dude that brings the pizza. Like, no one's really hearing me. I know every artist can spend so much heart and soul and tears into one song, and nobody wants to hear that song. They just want to say, man, I want the Mountain Dew. Like,
I ain't hungry. I already ate.
What? How do you do?
You hit the nail on the head. Like, you have to accept the whole thing. Like, you can either stay whiny about it, which I've been at times, I'm sure, or at least on the inside, or you can go, you know, this is a means to an end, right? And it's funny, like, I can still do Facebook Lives right now with my fan base. I can still do whatever. And all those things you just joked about will always come up. Like, I'm like, guys, you realize this is like nearly 20 years ago. Like, you still think I'm this guy. But the one thing we forget is that music occupies a space in our memories that is irreplaceable. You can't erase it. Like, especially if it's someone's adolescence, right? Those are the salad days of your youth that if you can impact a person's teenage years, you've impacted them for the rest of their lives. That's just the real reality of it. Not that we should make music for teenagers. I'm just saying, if we're willing to hit people at their most vulnerable times, they will cherish you in a very special place that you will continue to be able to be a part of. You know what I'm saying? I still benefit from what I did back then. Again, it wasn't necessarily I was trying to do it. It just happened, so to speak. But there's no question that I still have had momentum from that.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for 25 years, but I'm reading something here that you posted on your Instagram. You talk about a time where you said it was almost like God was telling you the reason why you're so distressed is because you put your hope in something that comes and goes, KJ-52, so your music career. Jonah is Jacob's dad. Jonah is Krista's husband. Jonah was on my birth certificate, and Jonah will be on my death certificate. Tell us about your pivot. Like, what happened? So 25 years, you're serving, you're doing all this music, you're focused, you're being successful, and then all of a sudden, have this moment with God?
Yeah, I can't say it wasn't a one-time moment. It was, you were seeing the levee break, really. I mean, at that point, that had been building to that point. Look, you don't think in those terms when everything's going great. It's when little by little, the well's going dry. That's when you're like, you really start taking inventory. You start taking stock of what's going on. So that's just the real reality of it. I mean, there was kind of a moment. It was back in October. I did go to Northern Michigan, of all places. George is real familiar with what I'm talking about. But I went to my childhood haunt of my youth, and I went there to write this final parts of my book that I thought in my head. It was a lot of things I was wrestling with, and I don't know if anybody has gone through this, but sometimes I've heard it called the dark night of the soul. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't think of too many moments in my life where I've felt that alone or that cold or that angry at that time. But that was what came out of it. It was that understanding. You know what I mean? Like, it is like when Jacob wrestled with the angel, and that angel turned out to be him seeing God face to face. He keeps saying to Jacob, like, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? He keeps making Jacob admit that his name is deceiver. You know what I mean? And then the next thing he does is he touches his hip. He can't walk. For the rest of his life, he has to rely on what God is going to do to get him through. And he changes his name. You know what I mean? So that's really where it was for me in a lot of ways.
Like, unpack that. What were all the different emotions and things you were, like, 25 years of touring, recording, in and out of airplanes? Like, what was all of those different, being on the road with you? I remember missing some shows. Having babies on the road and then having to hop right back out on the road. All those things that you kind of, put your faith in, put your hope in or something like that. And you start to see that, was the sacrifice and all the things that you did, was it worth it? Was it worth all the things that you've built right now?
Well, here's what it came down to. Because again, it was like at that moment, I remember very clearly, I was out running. I was running the length of that spot. It was an island is where I was. And I was running, and the island was literally empty. And I remember thinking, like, is the only real answer is that I just put it down and walk away. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Because I'm also, like, gifted a curse of being very extreme on everything. So I thought,
no,
George would know this, of all people. Long story short, I remember God saying to me clearly, what is the thing that's, like, really tormenting you? And I was like, it's this whole KJ-52 thing. It's like, yes, but the music has always been separate from the name, right? And it just dawned on me that, like, I don't have to walk away from music. It's not that. It's just I have to walk away from the thing that is causing the problem. If your left eye causes you to sin, pull it out, right? That's really what it came down to. And it was a relief for me. It was like, oh, I don't have to lay it all down. Like, Christians love to be like, I laid it all down at the altar, which makes sense. But on the other hand, you're like, sometimes we didn't need to. The point being is, that's when it all became real to me, that I was going to retire this name. By retiring it, I felt like I could move to the next thing. It's not a retirement from music. It was a retirement from that thing. But I would never set fire to it. I would never get rid of it, because to a lot of people that means something, like that name, that music, the content, the songs. It would be sinful of me to go, I'm scorching the whole earth on this.
Yeah.
So I didn't change my socials. I just tried to explain to people what this meant. Nobody got it, of course, a small percentage. You know what I mean? It is what it is. I've even actually, it's funny, now that all this has happened 8 months later, I've sat here going, like, what do I release music under? Is it my name? Is it Jonah KJ-52 Sorrentino? Is it, because there's still a ton of people who are like, I didn't even know you did anything. I'm like, oh.
So what I'm hearing you say is you laid down the persona, not necessarily the brand, or both?
Yes. In some ways, it was a laying down of the persona.
Okay. The persona.
In some way, it was a laying down of the brand, but God's gifts are without repentance. So I always felt like it would be wrong of me to feel like I can't make music. Now, I've gone through 6 months where I haven't been inspired really to write anything or do anything. It's just recently the world has inspired me to want to write again. And I've debated, how do I bring this music out? Because there's nothing worse for an artist to make an artistic statement and no one hears it, right?
Yeah.
So I think I do actually have the answer to that, which I could share with you if you want to hear it. But the point being is that I'm in a whole different space that is so beautiful that I can't remotely complain. I'll tell you what, I've joked about this, but I picked the perfect time to get out of the industry.
You did, because it was crazy. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, especially I've seen you pivot in a lot of different ways, literally from merch sales, because you are the king of pivoting and going to Walmart and making KJ-52 merch.
Yep.
Like you had the flea market of the tour merch tables. And you pivoted a lot of ways musically. You pivot in a lot of ways from who do you speak to? I remember you having conversations, like realizing you've always incorporated a lot of like 80s music into your shows and classic, rock songs that I'm like, what are we even doing this for? What does this have to do with this show? And I remember having this conversation with you on the tour bus. It was Creation Festival, like 2009, way back in the day. And you were putting these songs in there, not for the kids that were in front of you, but for the parents that brought them. Because you knew in your mind that it's not just the kids, it's the parents that need to co-sign you as an artist. And
yes,
I mean, the way that you thought about things it was just amazing to see how you would pivot. And then to see that you're making a perfect pivot from saying, hey, I'm going to kind of set down pursuing and continuing to build the career, but saying I'm going to make this transition and pivot into now being a pastor at a local church in a local body, and being in this position again, just as in perfect KJ-52 fashion and perfect timing. It's like I almost feel like you're in the Illuminati and you knew what the coronavirus is coming. I probably shouldn't say that on the internet, but because people go wild with stuff like that. But anyway, but being at a perfect time to be able to say, hey, I'm going to transition and be into a local body, how has that affected, what caused that decision to say, hey, I'm going to pivot into doing this? And then how has that affected how you make music and create still?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a good analogy, but people only see you when you pull the trigger. They don't see when you load the gun, when you take aim. They don't see when you practice shooting. They don't see when you are trying to be a good marksman. They just see the trigger and the shot, because the reality is I've been moving towards this for years now, like at least 3 or 4 years. I didn't know the full scope or spectrum of what that would mean. You know what I mean? I was still touring and serving as, interim youth pastor. I was serving as college pastor. I was a teaching pastor. I was communications pastor. These are all part-time, almost darn near volunteer positions, but they were prepping me for the next step. Right. So I wish I had a real simple answer, except all I can really say is it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it's the duty of kings to seek it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, God has been concealing a lot of things in my life for a long time. He always keeps me in the dark. He keeps us all in the dark. He conceals it, and while he conceals it, he gets glory out of it because it forces us to seek him more. But I also love the other part of that book in Proverbs. It says the duty of kings is to seek it out. God calls us and elevates us to a king level when we seek his heart. You know what I mean? And a king is a leader. A king is misunderstood. A king has, his ability to lead people. That's really where I was at. You know what I'm saying? But the funny thing is, who goes on staff at a church in the middle of a pandemic, right? And coming on staff, they were like, I can't believe we're so sorry you picked this time to come on staff. They put me on, we did a 21-day fast as soon as I got here. And this whole time I'm going, I have survived 20 years in the music industry. This is nothing. You know what I mean? I have been forced to constantly reinvent. I have been forced to constantly work with all kinds of people. I have been forced to constantly reevaluate and be a people person and speak to people's needs. That's how you survive. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel like I missed a beat. You know what I mean? I can't even tell you every day how many things I learned that are so relevant now to what I do.
Like what? What are some of those things?
Well, my titles are Go Team Director, which essentially means I'm in charge of all our volunteer teams, which means I'm just constantly dealing with people, right? George, you and I both know you can have a great merch table, but it's only as good as the person that runs it for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Indeed.
And especially if you're in front of thousands of people. So that is volunteer coordination to its finest. You can have a great song. It's only as good as the sound man that runs it for you. Mm-hmm. You can have a great stage show. You're only as good as your personnel around you, right? We are constantly needing as artists other people, some who are there paid, some who are there volunteer. Like that's literally what I'm here to do at the church, is to coordinate them, to enhance them, to help them get better, to work with them. And you have to be a people person, but you also have to be like a leader, but you have to be understanding, like everything that makes a great artist that has a good experience with people, especially in the church world. That translated, but I'm also creative director, which means I have to look at corralling all these creative types, which can be stage design, that can be, service execution, that could be coming up with ideas for the message, that could be lighting, that could be camera work. Like there's 1,000 things that could be too. So you and I both know, like the 5% that you see on stage is 95% off stage, right? Mm-hmm. And then just being an associate pastor, like that's just caring for people's needs, right? So you and I both know that the music is great, but you also have to be there for people. So like all that, all that. And I lived in a life that's been all online and digital and cameras and in front of crowds. Like it or not, the church world became streaming.
Yep. And even more so now with the COVID crisis. Mm-hmm.
A lot of churches were not prepared for that.
Right.
Some churches are closing because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So is that one thing that I know one thing that I'm learning as I kind of get a little bit older as an artist that I wish I would have known as a newer artist is just honing in on those leadership skills, like specifically that you don't realize that you're learning while you're on the road. But what are some of the things that you've learned from being out on the road in terms of leadership? Like how do you, because, being a one-man band, you didn't always have one man. You had, DJ or drummer. But no matter what, you came into a new situation and you had to kind of step in and lead in a lot of different ways. What are some of those skills that you wish you would have known back then that would have maybe prepared you better for where you're at now?
I mean, I think the reality is it's the same thing now. It's just there's two things that have guided my life is listen to God and listen to people. Like if you can do those two things, about 90% of what you do wrong fixes itself. And when I say listen to people, I mean, that's like understanding their needs, understanding how they communicate, understanding what they don't tell you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We say more of what we don't say than what we actually say. But listening to God, often we have our ideas of what God has to say through us.
Yeah.
We very rarely stop, to listen. So that's it. I'm sure at the beginning of my career, I was headstrong and thought I had it all figured out, as most of us think we do. I don't think there was ever a time where I was the most talented or whatever. I just was willing to work and listen, and that applies to anything.
Man. Dude, I can't even tell you. There's so many different topics that I definitely want to discuss and talk about with you. So when we have more time, I definitely want to have you back on and it really unpacks some of these things because I feel like every artist in the industry calls Jonah to be able to text them off a cliff. I know that you've had situations with management. You've had people steal money from you. I'm pretty sure you've had all sorts of different things that you've had to learn how to deal with. And we'll have to get to those things at another time.
We can do part 17 if you need to. I'm down, man. I got you, man.
But before you go, if you had one thing to sum up, like, you've always, I see how you had to prepare to move into this pivot that you kind of saw the writing on the wall 3 years ago and you started to prepare yourself ahead of time for those things. You've had to persevere through a lot of different ups and downs. And then kind of knowing when to pivot, like obviously you did it right then. So thinking about that whole concept of those 3 steps of things as a brand new artist or as an artist that's still looking to build their career on the front end of this thing and you coming in from the back nine, what's like the most important principle that you would want someone to take away?
I think the biggest thing that has served me well over the years, and this again probably applies to anything in life, but I think it's to build your tribe. Often we want to have the worldwide tribe, right? We want to go as far out as possible. Like we want to have the biggest tribe possible. And we don't realize like we've skipped steps A through Z probably to even get there. So, and a lot of times people go, well, what's my tribe? I say, just draw a circle around yourself and whoever's in that circle, that's your tribe. Because we already probably have a tribe. We just don't realize it. Those that are in our immediate circle are the ones that get us. They're the ones that appreciate us. They're the ones that will give to us. They're the ones that will be honest with us, hopefully. And if you serve them well and you know, never forget them, you'll find that your tribe will get a little bigger and then a little bit bigger. And then you just keep, it's like rinse, repeat. You just keep doing that. So I think that's the main thing. Like because if we try to hit everybody out the gate, we just get frustrated and we give up and we feel like we're, you know, screaming into the wind, like no one's listening. But if we draw that circle around ourselves, we can go, okay, maybe this isn't as glamorous, you know, but we'll be surprised how fast it will actually be fulfilling. You know what I mean? So,
well, bro, that is amazing. Like, perspective of what to do. I mean, it really is, because if you serve the people that you have well, the rest will take care of itself, man. Thanks again for joining us, bro. We'll have to talk again real soon.
Appreciate you guys. Absolutely.
Right.
I loved how we would end with something like that, Cherie, because you are one of those examples of finding your lane, finding your niche, and like what we talked about last week or the week before, you found those little girls and they were your tribe.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's probably the most important thing. Like I was saying, it's like own your own audience and serve them really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to hear from KJ-52 Jonah and recognize that he was enslaved by, at one point, the persona of his brand. Whereas when you're first starting, it's exciting, right? Because it's all coming together and it's like you're creating this persona and you can do whatever you want. And then you go to the middle, like we saw with Trey Little, where he created a persona, but it kind of matured and the world kind of told him a little bit what they wanted him to be. I kind of got from him, he was thrust into activism. I don't know if he was so much ready to be in that space, but that's kind of what his tribe said. Hey, speak to us on this. So now he's doing that. And then now you look at KJ-52 where he's like, okay, I've had all these iterations, but really who I am at the end of the day isn't what I created about myself. It's not my brand. It's not my persona. It's not what the world asked me to be. I am, you know, he's just Jonah and he's going to be Jonah and he's going to be a father and a husband and a friend. And those things are what matters the most. I'm a son of God. And if you read some of his content about why he retired, he gets down to the fact that he's a child of God. I think we need to keep that thread through whatever phase of artistry we're in, that we are children of God. And ultimately, he calls us by name.
Yeah, that's one of the most powerful lessons that I've learned. And I can't remember what book it was, what principle it was. I believe, it was a principle of begin with the end in mind. And the end, not just I want to end up on stage selling out festivals and stadiums. That's not the end. The end is when you're at the end of your life and people are reading your obituary at your funeral, and people are going up to view your body, and people are standing up to speak about you, and they're going to say, what are the things that they said about that? Like, as a father, what are my sons and my daughters going to say about you? What do they say about me? As a husband, what would my wife say? As a son, what was my wife going to say? As a cousin, as a brother, as a whoever you might be, as an artist, what are they going to say about you then? And you have to live that way now. If I want my sons to say, man, he always took time for me, he always was there for me, then I need to know when to say, hey, I'm not going to take this next call, or I'm not going to go and do this extra thing, or I'm not going to work late. I'm going to shut it down and spend those time with them. And I think that's one of the things that you can really have no regrets in, is if you look at your life and say, I'm gonna make sure that I serve the people that I'm in front of, because that's how I want to be remembered. I mean, I could talk for hours and forever about that, but I want to hear from you guys. Make sure you leave the comments down below. We're reading them even after the show is all over. I'll still be on for just a little while, having it in the conversation sections. If you want to continue this conversation, make sure you hit us up, the Jam the Hype Society. Shoot me a DM and I'll send you an invite to a private group of leaders in this industry that are artists that want to come together to be able to help one another, that understand one another, to be able to use our platforms to influence this modern culture, to live lives transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ.
That's right. And tomorrow we'll be here on Talkback Tuesday. Oh, sorry, not tomorrow. Tuesday, we're going to be on Talkback Tuesday, and we'll give you some more information about some of the dope episodes we have coming up. So stay tuned.
Yeah, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week, same time, same station. Peace.